He was a moron because of
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jane Kirtley. I'm the Silla Professor of Media Ethics and Law and the Director of the Silla Center here at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. I'm sure we're going to have some people wandering in for the next few minutes, so I'm going to get the introductory things out of the way. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Silla Center and the School of Journalism and Mass Communication to welcome you to our annual Spring Ethics Forum. Tebow, Teo, and Tiger, oh my, keeping your distance as an ethical sports journalist. The Silla Center, which is located here at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, is a unique resource on media law and ethics issues. Our graduate students and law students conduct research and write and edit the Silla Bulletin, which is published 3 times a year. The bulletin can be accessed online, but we also have printed copies of the most recent issue on that table over there, and I'll just give you a preview that in the next issue, the spring issue that will be coming out soon, we have a terrific article by one of our research assistants, Brett Johnson, on many of the topics we'll be talking about tonight. So if you're intrigued by what we'll be discussing this evening, I encourage you to take a look at the Silla Bulletin when it comes out at the end of the semester. This year's Ethics Forum, like all our Silla events and publications, is made possible in part by the generous grants of the late Otto Silla and his wife Helen, and also from our co-sponsor, the Minnesota Pro Chapter of SPJ. For several years now, SPJ has been working with us to sponsor ethics programs during SPJ's Ethics Month, which is the month of April. And so I'd like to introduce Sarah Bauer, who's the past president of the Minnesota Pro Chapter of SPJ, to say a few words.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. And on behalf of SPJ, thank you for being here tonight. And Jane, thanks for another great partnership for this event. The Society of Professional Journalists, we have a pro chapter in Minnesota. We're one of several professional chapters, and there's a student chapter here at the University of Minnesota. For the students who are interested and will be graduating soon, we're always looking for new members. So if you have any questions about membership at the pro level, please feel free to talk to me after the event, or we have a few board members here as well. I'll just mention quickly, we do have a few really exciting events coming up in May. We're doing an event about sort of the future of long-form journalism and how that relates to ebooks. It's going to be at the Loft Literary Center on May 15th. And then we also have our first ever film festival coming up. We're working with Trilon Micro Cinema throughout the month of June to present some journalism-themed movies. The kickoff film will be Anchorman, which I'm really excited about. And all of the movies that we'll be showing, as well as information about that May event, is available on our website, and that's mnspj.org. So again, thank you for being here, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Sarah. Before I introduce our excellent panel that we have to kick around the topics that we want to discuss tonight, I thought that since Sarah mentioned movies, I would show you a brief clip from a documentary that actually is an extra in the DVD issue of the movie 8 Men Out, about the Chicago Sox scandal in the World Series back in, God, when was it, 1913, something like that. And probably... Thank you. And, because looking at these people's clothes, and I thought it's got to be the 20s. But anyway, this is actually not a clip from the film. It's a clip from the documentary that accompanies it. But I thought it would be interesting to take a quick look at it because it talks a little bit about the dilemma of the journalist who is generally credited with having been the first to break the story about the gambling scandal where they threw the game. So
it was not only a terrible thing to have happened, but the people involved in it proceeded to work their way into a cover-up so that nobody would find out what really happened. This is especially true of the man most responsible for the fix, namely Charles Comiskey. He wanted to cover up the whole thing so it wouldn't be known that baseball was corrupt. He was the leader of the cover-up.
Their standard procedure was to close their eyes, and so they really didn't want the public to have any worries that the game wasn't being played cleanly. It was rising as the national pastime. It was starting to become $1 million industry for the fellows who owned the teams, and everybody liked baseball. And so the people that said nasty things about it and tried to call attention to the meddling of gamblers, they were given a hard time. There was a publication called Collier's Eye, that started digging into the rumors of the fix right after the World Series was over and started publishing the names of the players and the dates and all kinds of information, which baseball ignored, very much ignored. The series ended in October of 1919. The scandal began at the end of September of 1920. Another whole season was played.
I think today, with the internet and the way news travels within seconds or minutes, it seems so astonishing that something like this could have happened without everybody knowing about it, which makes it very much a product of its time, when newspapers were virtually the only way that news was transmitted, and it was easier to plan and execute something.
When I started my research for my book, I started with the question, who should get credit for the undoing of the cover-up of the fix, which lasted almost a year. And the short answer was Hugh Fullerton, the reporter at that time for the Chicago Herald and Examiner, who covered the series closely. We see him in the film as Studs Terkel. He sits with Ring Lardner, played by John Sayles, and together they sit during the series and circle suspicious plays. Christy Mathewson also sat with them, and it was really more Fullerton and Mathewson who teamed up on which plays were really probably very, very suspicious and evidence that the game was thrown. Although we don't know exactly which 7 plays they picked, but they were reputed to have 7 plays, and Fullerton wrote about that. And Hugh Fullerton did try hardest. Of all the mainstream reporters, Hugh Fullerton really did try the hardest to blow the whistle on the fix right after the World Series ended. He wrote in his column, quoting Comiskey, he said later, it was quoting Comiskey, that 7 players will not return. He wrote that in the newspaper on October 10th. The series ended October 9th. For his effort, Hugh Fullerton was clobbered by the newspapers, by the baseball magazine, by the Sporting News, called a muckraker. He was just making trouble. To actually give credence to these rumors and write about them and call for an investigation, that was pretty disloyal. So they came down very hard on Hugh Fullerton. It went very rough on him until the scandal finally broke, and then he was vindicated.
So a cautionary tale, I guess, for all sports journalists about what can happen when you break ranks. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight, which is basically what is it that sports journalists are supposed to do. And as I said, we've got this excellent panel to discuss these topics with us tonight. So let me tell you who we've got. Charlie Armitz, who is the sports editor at the Minnesota Daily. His work there involves organizing coverage of 25 university sports for the daily paper. He covered volleyball, men's basketball, and tennis for the Daily last year. He's a journalism student here at the University of Minnesota and hopes to explore sports journalism and writing after graduation. Chris Long anchors and reports sports at KSTP 5 Eyewitness News. He also hosts sports talk radio on 1500 ESPN. He started his career with 8 years at the CBS affiliate in Duluth, then moved to Fort Myers, Florida for 5 more years and is entering his 4th year at KSTP. He's covered Super Bowls, World Series, and All-Star games, but his favorite stories typically involve high school athletes or youth sports. Dawn Mitchell co-anchors Fox at 5 and is a reporter for Fox 9 Sports on KMSP. She came to Fox in 2004 after working in Milwaukee, Boston, and Chicago. She's won 2 Emmys for her work, was a finalist for the Lisagor Award. She's a multi-sport athlete in college and high school, and she can be found secretly cheering on her alma mater, Boston College. Michael Rand is a 1999 graduate of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. He's worked in various capacities in the sports department at the Star Tribune. Currently, he is assistant sports editor in charge of college sports. He also writes the daily Page 2 feature in the sports section and the Randball blog on StarTribune.com. He is a former Minnesota Daily staffer. And finally, David Brower, at my far right, your far left, has covered Minnesota media for MinPost since 2007. Previously, he was a reporter for our local alt weeklies and magazines, a radio talk show host, a national freelancer, and a community newspaper editor. He's currently completing his bachelor's degree here at the University of Minnesota and has written about this on MinPost and recently appeared on TPT's Almanac to talk about what it's like to be a 53-year-old college senior enrolled in 2 classes consisting entirely of freshmen. So with that, I had a bunch of questions that I thought of as we were approaching tonight's topic, And I think that the timeliness of this topic, it's just stunning how timely it is, because there's all kinds of new developments just within the last day or so, including Jason Collins' announcement that he is gay, and the decision of the New York Jets to sever their ties with Tim Tebow, one of the named individuals in our topic of tonight's forum. I have to start with a confession, which is to say I'm not a sports enthusiast, unlike most of the people in this room. The only sport I regularly follow is horse racing and IndyCar racing, because I grew up in Indianapolis.
You're
and
the only IndyCar fans left.
Well, I am one. I grew up in Indianapolis, and I can still tell you who won many of the races when I was living there. But team sports don't do much for me, and so the kind of loyalty that fans who support teams have is really something that I don't fully comprehend or understand. But we'll be talking, I'm sure, about that during the course of this evening. As I said, I have a bunch of questions that I came up with and that the panelists suggested to me, and we're going to talk those around for a little bit, but we really do want to get you involved as well. And so when it's time to turn to the audience, we actually have Cassie Batchelder, one of our SILA RAs, who has a microphone, and she will help you take the mic and raise your questions. So we do want to make this an interactive evening. So I'm going to start with the first question, and for the most part, I'm not going to ask a particular person to respond. I'll just leave it to you guys to decide who wants to respond. I'm going to start with the fundamental thing that has puzzled me for a long time, which is, what is the difference between a columnist, a commentator, and a sports reporter or journalist? And are there different rules for their conduct depending upon which hat they wear? And part of the reason I asked that question is that in preparing for tonight's event, I was looking around to see if I could find any ethics codes for sports journalists. The Society of Professional Journalists, one of our co-sponsors, has an ethics code that's been around in one form or another for quite a long time, but it doesn't specifically deal with sports ethics. So I discovered online this thing called the Football Writers Association of America Ethics and Press Relations Committee's ethics policy. And they quite candidly took a lot of it from SPJ's codes of ethics. But it was very interesting to me which things they kept and which things they didn't include. And I think that suggests to me that there is a divide, at least in some minds, between what sports journalists do and what other journalists do. So what do you all think? Is there a difference?
Dave?
Well, I mean, I don't work at a place that has a formal separation between opinionators and reporters. Chris and Dawn and Michael and Charlie, in fact, all do. So maybe they're better to answer it. But I'll take a stab at it, which is, typically, I'll give you an example of baseball. Typically, the baseball beat writers, while they can have, I suppose, opinions about whether a play was good or bad, they're not paid to give their evaluation of Ron Gardenhire or write a searing column about whether Chris Cluey is off his rocker for supporting gay rights. They're there to report the game action, the insider stuff, the basic beat reporter thing. And in fact, newspapers I know much better than TV. A lot of times what happens is that there's a dance between the beat writer, who knows a lot about what's going on but is somewhat constrained about their ability to tell it. They hand it off to the columnist, who is there to sort of be the free swinger and get the eyeballs and get people talking. I think, as I see things developing, I think sports is developing like everything else in journalism, which is this divide between the reporter and the opinionator is breaking down. I think Michael's, frankly, an example of that, and frankly, there are many sports reporters in town who do report. But traditionally, that's been the divide.
I can add, for me, it depends on the medium and the expectation of the audience that you are presenting whatever it is to. When I work in television at KSTP, I am doing, of course I'm going to talk louder on a big play or more excited when the home team's going to win. It's not homerism, it's just the nature of things. But I'm going to stick to facts a lot more on television than when I go upstairs in the same building, getting paid by the same people, talking to some of the same audience. When I'm doing sports talk radio, it's opinion. I can go up there and say whatever I want, however I want, baseless or not, and hey, that's just sports talk radio. It's why people listen to it. So there is a huge difference just in my job And I've got the same info coming in. I'm watching the same game, talking to the same athletes, hearing the same quotes, forming the same opinions in my head, but it's how I let them out. And I think it's a big difference. It's the same difference between a reporter and a columnist. You know, when you see a columnist's face on an article, that's an opinion. When you see a byline, that's usually going to stick to fact.
Sure, and I think the Star Tribune and a lot of other papers too have blurred that line, like David mentioned. We have a lot of beat writers who write what we call insiders now, which are, kind of somewhere between a story and a column. I don't know exactly where they fall all the time. Some people make them more like columns. Like I think our hockey writer, Michael Russo, kind of skews more towards not quite a column, but he's more authoritative with his writing. He knows that beat inside and out, so he's probably more willing to write that way. But when we give our beat writers license to write like that, we're not asking them necessarily for opinions, but we are asking them for insights that you might not necessarily want under a simple byline story. So I think it is kind of coming together a little bit more than it used to, but there is still that distinction between what a beat writer is and what a columnist is.
I mean, Michael Rand's is not going to write. Michael Russo's not going to write that the coach should be fired.
Nor am I.
That would be crossing the line.
But he might give you reasons why, if you think he should be fired, this is the defense you would make.
Exactly.
That's the dance.
There's also issues now where I think a lot of media outlets want to change with the times. I mean, you have Twitter where we're allowed to give our opinion and our names are on it, but for me, I'm still tied corporately to Fox. But Fox wants us to give our opinion out that way. So it's a fine dance between I'm giving my opinion, however, when I go on and I do the news, I still have to be journalistic and have that integrity. So I try not to cross the line, but you still want to have your personality come across. And when you get the corporate line saying, Fox is now, we want you to have personality and be edgy. Well, I happen to be edgy to begin with in my personal life, so it's easier for me. Well, some people just want to kind of put that out there, and I think that's when boundaries are crossed. Sure. So I think trying to be, hip and with the times and get to your target audience and do all that there's still lines that you still have to clarify something through two sources. And I know a lot of younger people out of school, some of them are fantastic, some of them I know are on our assignment desk. We heard this on CCO, should go with it. Oh, just because you heard it on, first of all, another outlet, I'm not going with it. Can we prove it from two other sources, and then maybe I'll go with it. And second of all, I know for a fact that this isn't right. You still have to, you don't want to get it right and get it wrong just to be first. So just to be entertaining, and I call those yell shows, the ones that are on ESPN, whether it's radio or TV, they just yell at each other and they don't care. And I think sometimes sports is becoming more sensational than factual, and pretty soon I think I'll probably be called old school, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, I think as far as columnist versus reporter, there's still a fundamental difference in roles. Reporters out there to get the facts. I don't think there's that much difference between a sports and news reporter, but a columnist is out there to entertain. They're going to say stuff that's controversial. You like to prove it with facts, but it's going to be different. So I think it's changing. I personally don't like that. I think that in a casual kind of blog type format, it's okay to have a reporter out there, not necessarily giving opinion, but giving a little bit more analysis. But and when it comes to, writing more serious stories, there's a difference between what a reporter is supposed to do and what a columnist is supposed to do. The line's a little bit blurred now.
Lots.
Mm-hmm.
Lots.
Yeah.
She talked about how Fox's images. I work for, this is not an editorial, I work for a very conservative broadcasting organization. So what she's asked to do and what I'm allowed to do
You'd be fired for
sometimes are very different. I get it. I don't mind it. I understand it. You could say some pretty outlandish stuff, and somebody might come down and say, that was great. Because I think for my organization, they might say, don't ever do that again. And they're both right.
Mm-hmm.
They're both right. If that's what they are trying to do, and that's what our group is trying to do, as long as we're still telling the news and being factual and being true to the stories, You can do both things and still be right.
But the sad reality is that you have to police your own career, because what one boss is telling you to do might be cool and hip now, but it's not going to be in a month or a year from now. And you want to keep your job and your career. So, I won't say who, but we have a multitude of bosses in my career. And I've had some bosses to tell me, wouldn't that be cool if you skied down the mountain in a bikini and gave a report at the bottom? I'm like, no. But some young girl or boy or guy or anyone trying to get their career might say, yeah, I'll do that, just because their boss asked them. You have to police your own thing, saying, okay, you want me to do that? Let's explore what may happen and why that's incorrect. But you have to do that with your own employer.
People just might watch it. That's the problem.
Right.
Well, picking up on that, if I could, because I'd like to explore that a little bit more in a slightly different context, because I think it was Dawn that alluded to, and Chris too, alluding to the idea of trying to be first with a story. And I'm thinking about the NFL draft just last week. And I am told, I don't know anything about this, but I'm told that some of the teams were not above, or management were not above putting out sort of misinformation about who they were going to draft to create a lot of buzz. I can't imagine they would do such a thing. Yeah, I mean, so how do you avoid being a tool for somebody else's lies in the sports environment?
If anybody knows that, let me know.
I mean, it takes savvy is really what it takes. I mean, I don't think I saw any media outlet in the draft, for example, who didn't at some point say, and management is basically bullshitting you. I mean, or words to that effect. Everybody knows it's going on. You have to be a real rube not to get that. So I do think that in that context, sports reporters were not parroting the party line. They were sort of passing it along with a wink. Not really as entertainment, although it was that, but as this idea of this is how the game is played. And in this sense, and in many, many others, sports is not so different from politics. I mean, everybody's in on the game. The good ones tell you, so you're in on the game too. And I think that applies to sports.
Were you at Rick Spielman's, the Vikings general manager, does a press conference the days leading up to the draft?
I wasn't at that one.
Were you down there? I don't even know. We go because they hold it. In the event, he comes out and says something outlandish.
But he doesn't say anything.
It's the worst, most pointless. We all say it. We're standing there waiting for him to come out saying, he's going to say, there's one guy for every position we love. There's plenty. If someone calls to trade with us, we'll answer the phone, but we may not.
Take the best player available.
It is on the calendar of things we do. It is the most pointless waste of time. We all have to go in case he comes out and says, we're taking this guy and you can hold us to it. And that's never once happened for any team ever. Okay, but it might, and if it does, we need to be there.
So I part of the headline on this event mentioned Manti Teo. So one of my questions for the Workaday people is, did the media organizations get played about the Vikings' interest in Teo? Or did they maybe love it because it's Teo and it's eyeballs and all of that?
I think their interest in Teo was legit. I think what happened was there just happened to be better players available by the time they got to that spot. So I don't think people necessarily got played there. I think that was sincere. I think they liked countless people, and he happened to be one of the most interesting people that they liked, and it was a position of need, and it was all these things. So and in that regard, I don't think it was just smoke and mirrors on that. I think if in a certain scenario they might have wound up with Manti Teo, and we would all probably not be here because we'd still be working on that story right now.
I'll admit, and my wife, I'm the biggest Notre Dame fan in this room, and I am so glad they didn't take Teo. We didn't want to deal with it. We would have.
Oh.
Yeah. We set up one-on-one interviews the day after the draft with all the first rounders. I did them, and they were interesting this year. I was dreading if they took Manti Teo, I had to ask 2 questions that you all wanted me to ask, and I would have had to ask you all fans, not you all sitting in this room as journalists. I didn't want to ask them. So, Manti, about this girlfriend. I've heard you answer this question 15, 20 times myself. I'm sure you've answered it 200 by now. But in that situation, you have to ask the question. And I am so glad I didn't have to do that.
Because your boss would have said, how come you didn't ask that question, Chris?
Well, and viewers also. If you're watching me talk to this man a day after he was drafted, whether you are taking the high ground or not, I can't believe this guy didn't ask about the girlfriend. Right. So I'm glad they did.
Well, speaking of asking about the girlfriend, let's go back a few months to the sad death of the girlfriend, right on top of the death of the grandmother, which we ultimately learned the death of the girlfriend was a fabrication, as was the girlfriend. And there was a lot of commentary at the time suggesting that the sports journalists who had been taken in by the hoax hadn't been doing their elementary work. That little clip we saw was about an alternative newspaper in Chicago being the first to break the story about the scandal, which is a similar phenomenon as what occurred in the case of Monte Teo. And I'm wondering how much of that is a product of the push to create a story, to create a mystique when sports journalists are covering an athlete, whether it's Tim Tebow or Smarty Jones. You know, we love a story. We love the story. And is the role to encourage our readers, our viewers, to think about these things or to feel very strongly about these things? And if that's the case, then where does the narrative take us when it ultimately crashes and burns, whether it's, you know, Michael Phelps or Tiger Woods or whoever the case might be?
I'll take the lead on that. I think the harsh reality is in our business, our personnel is so short. We have 2 people in our sports department. So unless there was something glaring that I found weird about Manti Te'o and his girlfriend could be fake, I would not have the time to dig into it. You find the alternate newspapers or the smaller groups of journalism because they're hungry and they want to cut their teeth and they have the time, you know, to go out and dig on something where I've got to go to Wild, I've got to go to Vikings, and then after that I've got to do this and X, Y, and Z. So unless there is something that's glaring, I am not allowed to waste my time to go and do all that. And that's something that you really have to do right if you're going to tear down, especially a huge figure like that.
In this day and age, you know who does maybe the best job of covering college sports?
Mm-hmm.
Student papers.
Yep. Because they're there. They know what smells right, what doesn't, and they hear what people say.
And nowadays, there's a lot more accountability on student papers than there was when I went to school because it's available to a wider audience because of the internet, because of Twitter. And some of the biggest stories we've heard was, I think, was the Auburn scandal. Broke in a student newspaper.
All of them.
And you're right. It's if I'd heard a story that this guy that the Vikings drafted is this miracle, he blew out both his knees when he was 9 years old and was told he'd never walk again. And it's amazing that he became this football player that's been drafted. I don't know that I would not take their word for it. I don't think I would track down a doctor in his hometown and say, tell me about this.
Well, the reality is you have 30 seconds for a VOSAT on it, you know? So, you know, here's 30 seconds. I can go talk to his coach, and the coach gives a sound bite, and I talk to, you know, his mom, and that would be... Unless I got a tip from someone or a reason to really dig into, because, you know, I'm not into the gotcha mental version of sports journalism. Some people are. They want to find something, they want to find something wrong, and they want to tear people down. But I call it the gotcha. You know, like, oh, I think you're great. I'm going to find something wrong about you. And I'm from the East Coast. I can say that. That's definitely a Boston and New York kind of mentality. And I think the Midwest is a little more fair, unless you're asked to do that. So.
And I don't think the Teo thing with the girlfriend, that story never struck me as something that would make me immediately skeptical. Maybe other things would, but I don't know. Maybe it had a too good to be true kind of sentimentality to it, but it was also it's not something that you would imagine somebody would lie about, that kind of thing. And so, you know, maybe there's some other stories where you would be naturally skeptical. That one is not one. So I don't necessarily blame the sports media in that case that was covering that story, because it feels like, you know, who's going to say, no, I don't think your girlfriend's real. Right. It's the weirdest story I can imagine happening.
But to just be a contrarian for a second, I mean, David was talking about the parallels between covering politics and covering sports, and I think that that's a really useful parallel in some respects. I mean, do you seriously think that if it was suddenly announced that, I don't know, I mean, this is probably not a good example because everybody knows who Mark Dayton's children are. But suppose somebody announced that one of Mark Dayton's children was killed in a terrible accident. Do you think that journalists at the Star Tribune or at any of your television stations would say, oh, okay, I guess we'll just report that without making any attempt to check it out?
No, I think they would definitely check that. I don't know if I think those might be two kind of divergent types of stories. One is more of it feels like more of a news story, and there's more of a human interest story, where this is part of his character, and it's the backstory that he's creating. And when you're writing a story, a feature story like that, you do very much tend to take people kind of at their word. You are doing some secondary reporting by talking to other sources about these people, but that is not. I don't feel like the Tebow girlfriend thing is anything that would naturally come up in the course of a reasonably thorough story.
Well, but a couple things on that. I think the difference between your Dayton story and the Tebow story is that, Dayton's a public figure and responsible for the public purse. We, on some level, own him, or we should. Whereas with Tebow, it's entertainment. And I know sports people hate it when, and they almost make fun of it sometimes when they're called the toy department. But this is an example of where you've got a story where the fate of the world doesn't really hang on it. Now, that said, anytime you think journalists are excessively cynical, here's your rejoinder, right? Everybody loves a good story. On some level, we trusted Manti Te'o, and we got burned. And the truth is, this has happened, not screwing up this badly, but this sort of thing has happened to all of us in our career. I mean, it has in mine, I can tell you that. It's somebody who had a great story, and somebody that you wanted to believe, and you even maybe got some superficial indications, maybe from doing other stories on, that solid stand-up, except they had a big secret. And you have to go right in there. Now, I believe I'm trying to remember, the papers who got played were the South Bend Tribune.
Well, everybody.
And I think AP.
And it rippled.
But there were two long stories that were done on this thing. So while I'm very sympathetic to Don's comment about the 30-second VOSOT, these were newspapers covering the biggest institution, the biggest player at the biggest institution in their market, and I realize this is hindsight, and a fairly easily verifiable fact. Like, she died here, and this was her name, and it was in California. And the truth is, when Deadspin basically blew the whistle on it, that part of the story was the easiest thing for them to check. And I can't remember now, but I think AP ran their piece off of the South Bend Tribune piece. And the fact that AP didn't check it, that really surprised me, because that's basic blocking and tackling that AP and their enterprise desks are supposed to be good
Well,
at.
they're the gold standard. Yeah. Like, sometimes we'll have, oh boy, I'm going to report this, and I'm sure of my sources, and I'm with it, and I like it. I'm going to go with it, and I feel confident. And then AP runs it, and you go, whoa, I was right. Yeah. Or they were right. I wasn't lied to. I wasn't misled.
Well,
I made the right judgment trusting my sources.
Could you share with the audience how you don't know for sure, but how do you think AP and the South Bend paper got this information? I mean, where did it come from?
Anti.
Himself?
Yeah.
Or do you think that the athletic department PR? That's what I'm trying to.
They helped it, but
But
they
he
also
did
had
too.
no reason.
To doubt him.
He says, I have this girlfriend. She's great. I love her. She's terrific. I'm playing. I'm inspired by her. And then while now I'm playing, this tragic event happened, and you never stop to think, have you ever met the girl? Did you play this up in your head?
Girlfriend. Right.
And the thing we've all learned from the story is this isn't as rare. I remember I saw the Deadspin story, and I went, this makes sense. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard, but it makes sense. And then we learn more about it, and you find out there's hundreds upon hundreds of people that have fallen for the same thing. I don't know how, but they do. And sure, if he's talking all this to his buddies, and they're like, oh, great, it's terrific. Linnea called you this morning and said, play well. We'll do that. And the sports information guy said, this is a neat story. He's got this long-distance girlfriend and so on and so forth.
Well, and you've got this whole other element that's, the rumor, that the never confirmed rumor that it's all a big cover-up for him being gay. So that's a story, nobody's proven that, so it's likely not true. But I'm just saying, that's floating around out there at the same time, which may provide some incentive for some people who would normally regard as bad.
No less believable.
And
to cover up for the guy.
The elephant in the room is you have to be darn sure before you ruin a college kid's life that you are right. There's a different set. If you're a professional athlete, you're an adult, I think in my mind, you're on a different level than if I'm going after someone who's a kid, who's still in school. And you really have to be 100% sure.
That's why we need kids going after kids.
Well, there was
Get your peers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question to put to Charlie. I mean, would you at the Daily, presented with a similar kind of story, would that be something you'd be inclined to kind of probe behind, or would you just take him at his word?
Well, I think Mike brought up an interesting point that, it's a human interest story, and that's what these media organizations were looking for. They weren't looking for hard news. There's some scandal behind it. And so I think that element
Yeah, but aren't even human interest stories supposed to be factually accurate?
Yeah, they are. They should be. But I think the mentality is different. It shouldn't be, but it is. You're going in, you want this heartwarming story. That you want people to like it, and as a result, then you get something like this.
Well, let's stipulate that maybe young people are different, but let's think of another example of somebody who managed to pull the wool over a lot of people's eyes for a very long time, Lance Armstrong, who by no definition could be considered a kid, right? So therefore would presumably be fair game. And we had a lot of very prominent journalists, and I'm thinking particularly of Sally Jenkins at the Washington Post, who wrote a book with Armstrong, and right up to the end, I saw on the Washington Post website she was defending him to the very end that no, he couldn't possibly be a doper. He ultimately apparently apologized to her for making her look like a fool. But I'm just left with the question, how did he manage to perpetuate this lie for so long?
any story that you get, whether it's Lance Armstrong or this kid's not going to play tonight because he tweaked his knee, is only as good as your source.
Absolutely.
That's all you can do.
And if you can prove it wrong with some other facts.
And Michael said there's some savvy to it. You have to know how much you trust your source. And we all have our sources, and I could list them. People that I trust, everything they say. And if somebody called me right now and said, "This is the story. Here's what happened," I would go with it.
Like John King with the Boston bomber, probably.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Then there are the people that go, well, that's enough to make me make a couple phone calls and see what's what. And then there's the people that I don't trust a single word they say. John King wasn't wrong. His sources were wrong.
That's
that's a perfect example outside of sports.
So like one of the things
everybody's crucifying him, and his sources burned him.
Right, but he probably also went with one source, or didn't have an editor who said.
Two, right.
So I've always, with regard to Sally Jenkins, who's a respected journalist and just screwed up massively and in public and long after she should have known better because people were criticizing her for it, I've always said that one of the great underappreciated sources of corruption in our business is source corruption, that you do get close to a source, you do trust a source for objective reasons, and then when it comes time, the source can manipulate you. And it's not that we're all trying to be bad people. It's that we all have to kind of make judgments a lot. And so I think what happened to Sally was classic source corruption. She lost her objectivity, clearly, but in the book business, that's not a requirement. But it shows what happens when you get too close to a source. And John's absolutely right, too. It does take sources to break scandal. I mean, it sounded like from Deadspin's reconstruction of this, they didn't just pick up the phone and start calling around to find the girlfriend's place of death. They got a tip. Somebody thinked on it.
Right.
And so, I would assume that if somebody had called up the South Bend Tribune, the South Bend Tribune would have gone with it. They would have gone after it. I don't think they would have not gone after it. I think probably what happened there is the source was a kid who reads Deadspin and would never be caught dead reading the South Bend Tribune. But sources are so important.
Which brings me, I guess, to a related question. A few years ago, I went to speak to the Sports Lawyers Association, which was a very interesting group of people because in addition to being lawyers, in addition to being ex-jocks, so they were the best-looking lawyers you've ever seen in one room, most of them were also agents. So they wore multiple hats, which was a very interesting thing from a legal ethics standpoint. But one of the things that they kept saying to me was this idea that the part of an athlete's career persona that is a matter of public interest is how they play. And that's all fair game. Anything that's going to have an impact on how they play, how they perform, how they do their job, whether it's on a team or as a sole performer, that's fine. But they said the athlete's private life is nobody's business. And if the athlete gets in trouble with the law, that's nobody's business. I mean, they said this with a straight face because they said none of that has anything to do with their ability to do their job. So, I mean, I have a million reasons why I don't think that that's true, but I'd be curious to know what you all think.
Well, I would definitely disagree with that.
That's a good agent to say that, though.
It is, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind just right off the bat is, if they go to jail, obviously that impacts their ability to play, but it also impacts their character. And in this day and age where sports have become such a multi-billion-dollar industry, character does matter to a certain degree to these teams that are paying them, to the people that are watching them, and I think that does become part of the game. And if you can have someone who's not some model citizen, and you can have them on your team, and that's fine. But you do need to expect the consequences as well.
Well, and a lot of teams have a written code of conduct, like the Vikings do after the whole boat scandal. So if there is a written code of conduct, there is something to follow along. I tend to, when you're in an organization where there's news and sports and it's delineated, if it does not affect what they do on the field, it's usually passed off to a news reporter. So that's how you'll see a news reporter covering the trial or something like that. We'll report on if he's gone from the team or she's gone from the team, how it affects the team. I personally don't care how many girlfriends a player has or boyfriends a player has. I don't care about their personal lives. And I hope to God every single day I go to work that they don't do something stupid that makes me want to know their personal life. But sometimes we're forced into it because of a code of conduct or how it affects the team or, that's right, character issues.
And we have to deal with burning bridges. You go after a player, next time you go in the locker room to get a quote,
They won't talk.
not just them. Nobody will.
And I'm sure these sports agents would never, ever negotiate a deal for an athlete on the basis of their image and who they're purported to be. I mean, the athlete that comes to mind in all of this is Tiger Woods. We can argue about whether the coverage of Tiger Woods' infidelity was appropriate, but at the time, I've heard myself argue, this is a guy who is sold on the basis of his image as a Superman. And if you're going to be out there doing that, and there's a chink in the armor, it's news. It's going to be covered. I personally, I think I do share Dawn's queasiness about knowing about athletes' private lives for gratuitous reasons. I think there is some expectation of privacy, and I don't think everything is fair game. That's not how I've sort of lived my career. At the same time, I think there's a much wider berth. You guys have already communicated some of where it becomes relevant. Obviously, it affects how the team plays. Now, that can be a little bit of a self-proving thing. You can say, here's a huge example of a scandal that's all of a sudden everybody's going to be thinking about it's going to affect stuff. But, I don't really see that in this market that much of something where I go, that's from out of left field. That's just to get eyeballs and clicks.
And that's our market.
Right.
It would turn Minnesotans off. And there is something to that, where if you're in Boston or New York or D.C., my hometown, it's a different world. If you go after somebody here, especially if you end up being wrong or deemed as unfair, that's going to hurt your image. And Minnesotans, Midwesterners, don't want that. East Coasters, go get them. Oh, you're wrong? Nice try.
Except for the Humphreys Kardashian wedding.
Let me give one example.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Then please say whatever you were going to say. But I just picking up Tiger Woods for just a second. I assume you'd all draw a distinction between his marital infidelities and his alleged cheating, shall we say, at the recent tournament where he supposedly dropped the ball and moved it or whatever it was that he did. I mean, one's a legitimate story, one's
Absolutely.
not.
It's a huge, massive, legitimate story.
And why is that? Does it go to his integrity, or does it have something to do with sort of preserving the integrity of the sport?
People love nitpicking golf.
It's golf.
Oh, yeah. Golfers love calling other golfers. If you go play golf with two people, and one guy's over in the trees, the other guy's going to be standing next to you going, did he just move his ball? Did you see him move? The golfers love that.
He should
Golfers love that honorable game.
That's right. He should EQ himself.
That, I think, was a bigger story because it was Tiger, but it wasn't. It could have been DA Points, and it still would have been a big deal. And most of you probably don't know who DA Points is.
That's true. But at the same time, there was also, I think, a legitimate dramatic backdrop of the fact that this guy is number 2 to Jack Nicklaus in majors, and he's not won one for 5 years, and this was a first tournament in a while. He's been favored to do it, and he had to take a 2-stroke penalty, and yes, he has this backdrop of cheating. Different context, but suddenly, you know how it is, everything you do becomes suspect once you start to lose that integrity battle.
Let me give one example. I was going to talk about this last story. I don't want to derail everything, but this is a
No,
great
it's
story
fine.
that I thought of hadn't thought of going into this, and I should have. There was a story, and I won't give too many specifics here, but if you followed it, you'll know what went on. There was a high school team that just before their postseason, half the team was suspended. And that's how we all first heard the story. This team that is on the radar is a decent team. They're not the best in their sport. Half the team suspended. Okay, something happened. My immediate thought, having covered high school sports, and it said in my bio, I love covering prep sports, beer bust.
Yeah.
Somebody's parents went out of town, they had a keg, and they got busted. We made the calls, and what actually tipped me off was not that people were saying, it's no big deal, nothing, it's an internal matter. It was how adamant they were about it. And I don't think it was ever reported with an attributed source what actually happened. We all heard rumors.
Yeah.
I think I know what happened. I think it's a bigger story than it ever was actually attributed and reported. But no one with the school talked. None of the team talked. No one said anything. Would I be comfortable going on the air and saying, I think this is what happened? Yeah. Would I be comfortable saying, this is what happened? No. Which is why it's never, and we still don't know what it is.
See, I would not be comfortable going on the air saying, I think this is what happened.
Well, good point. Good point. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say.
They don't
I
care
shouldn't
what
say
I
on
think.
the air. I should
they
say
want to know the facts.
to any 2 or 3 of you around a couple drinks at a bar, saying, "I think this is what happened," and I'm pretty confident. Right. That's a better way to phrase it. Not on the air.
Yeah.
And
I know the media did a good job on that because I'm still confused
we
about
all
that story.
we all chased it and we all hammered it, and it could be a pretty bad story.
Right.
But we could not Channel 5, not Fox 9, we could not get to. I saw one outlet report it, but it was unattributed.
Which outlet?
I'm not comfortable saying that because I don't want to sound like I'm throwing them under the
Guess
bus.
I got to buy you a beer.
If they got it, right. If they got it, they got it. But
Right.
that's the best example of an ethical story that if it were the Vikings,
Everyone
would have gone 900 miles an hour to get the story. Because it's a high school team and the police didn't end up filing charges, which I think is the big turning point in that story.
Yep.
It's really, I've only had 2 or 3 stories that I've been exposed to like this in my career that were that much of an ethical dilemma. How hard do we go after this? And for me, once the police decided not to press charges and the school didn't suspend anyone, until someone wants to tell me something, I'm out.
So it's not the Steubenville rape story. It's,
Right.
Right?
No.
Right.
Which is obviously one of the big sports stories of the last several months.
No, this was
No,
high
it's
school.
not.
This
This
was
is
local.
local.
But that kind of brings...
Sorry, I just wanted to get that out.
No, because
That was good. I went at least more in my seat on
that's
that
great because it actually is a nice segue into another topic that you had suggested we talk about, and we've kind of been alluding to it, which is the difference between what you call, and I don't know if everybody calls it, format reporting, and reporting using social media. Are the standards different if you're tweeting?
Do the
as
standards
opposed-
exist?
Well, no, but I
That's a
mean,
better question.
but as opposed to when you're going on the air or on ESPN, some local experience in the last few weeks might suggest that, at least for some people, the standards are different in terms of what they're going to say on Twitter and what they would say if they're writing a column or appearing on the air.
Well, I don't know if the standards are different, but the vernacular is. Obviously, you're limited by characters, and you have to give it in your own personal voice. But I don't know. Personally, I still think if you're going to go with something, you have to have your 2 sources, and you're also representing your outlet. So it better be right. So it's just another extension. I mean, you have your stories all the time, but you will also add things on Twitter, and the same as you, Chris, that you may not have time to put in your sportscast later, but it's something that's right and on the topic, and that's the difference about social media. It's something you might not even have a chance to or time to put on later, but you can put it on Twitter. But I think the standards are still...
I think it's more personal. I think that's me. I may go on Channel 5 and say, we've learned this, this, and this. You don't know which of the 6 people in my department found that out. Sometimes it's a great story. We'll say, Darren Wilson, Joe Schmidt learned. But we'll say, we have learned, or we've been told. So you don't know who that is, but if it's on Twitter, that's personal. That's me. So I think, but then the trick is where you get, and you've seen this with people, I'm hearing this. What does that mean?
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. I've been told is in a lot.
I've been told.
I mean, if you don't say the sources, then
rumor has it.
I could say I've been told blah blah blah. Well, you might have told me. You don't know any better than I do, based possibly on. So you can be more anonymous with your sources because there's not that standard. But I think people that say, "Well, it's Twitter, so I'll just throw it out there," that's a huge mistake because that's all you.
Yeah.
If I got fired tomorrow by Channel 5, I could still tweet. I could still find stuff out, and that's my reputation.
And you can retweet it, or you can put it out there and you can delete it if it's wrong, and then it's been retweeted 900 times. It doesn't matter. Everybody
Right.
knows that you are the one that screwed it up.
Right.
Right. And you better be careful what you retweet. Read everything. Some people read half of something and they retweet it. And I'll say to my friends, "Did you read the whole article?" They're like, "No." I go, oh, you might want to take that down. So you have to read everything.
I mean, one of the great things about Twitter for me is that I started on Twitter in 2008 because a few other media people were on it, and I got a chance to see a different side of them than the PR-controlled side. And it still sort of blows me away that how free, quote-unquote, objective journalists are on Twitter, tweeting on a company account to say what they really think. I think it's awesome. But it's I keep wondering. I keep wondering, when the whip comes down, or maybe it hasn't, and it hasn't been chronicled enough. But for example, I don't watch TV news. It's just not an efficient source of information for me.
Jerk.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But thank God for Twitter, because I follow a ton of TV people on Twitter, and with each passing year, they get better and better. I can see who's the good reporter, who's not trapped in the 30-second BOSOT, who's not trapped by the corporate PR, whatever we're doing to get the most eyeballs thing. They're sharp. They're funny. They've got good insights. They're actually pretty good columnists, if you let them be, but they're also reporters. I really hope we're all past this notion that because you're a columnist, you're not a reporter. If you have a columnist who's not a reporter, unless I guess they're getting fantastic traffic and you're totally, into that, you should fire them. I mean, every columnist should be a reporter. And what's nice about Twitter is, I think it is evolving toward the future, which is I read them because they're good. They're good at what they do. It's fun.
Are they good at entertaining you or at giving you facts, or
Yes.
both?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, it's not communication if you say something and nobody's paying attention. So the idea that when you give journalists more freedom, either passively or actively, that suddenly they become more interesting, somebody you want to spend a little more time with, reading what they're doing. This should be a lesson for us, frankly. I mean, I frankly don't know why, especially newspaper sports departments, don't make everybody a columnist with some insistence that they report. I mean, that's what sports, they should do that.
You know who's great at infusing personality into Twitter? That guy.
Yeah.
His Twitter feed, on any consecutive tweets, it'll be great insight on a sports story. Then it'll be a great fact that he got through reporting. And then the next one will be some off-the-wall crazy thing, maybe in response to one of our other friends, that just will make you laugh. And it makes him a must follow for Twitter, because you're going to get informed, you're going to get entertained, and you're going to know who he is. And I have the benefit of a lot of TV and radio to get some personality out. That's tougher in print, and you do an amazing job on Twitter. I'm not just saying that's because you're sitting here.
I unethically paid him to say
That's
that.
right. You do an amazing job of building, and it's not building a personality, it's expressing your own personality through Twitter, maybe better than anybody in the market. And I honestly believe
And
that.
it's credibility enhancing.
Right.
Because even though, we'll use Michael as an example because he's going to buy us all a beer after this. Even if 93% of what's on his feed are jokes and bits with people, there's going to be 7% of the time where he's going to say, the Gophers have hired Rich Pitino. And I'm going to trust him more because I followed him bit by bit over the past now several years. And he's established credibility, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, instead of saying, trust me because I'm in the Star Tribune.
It's hard to do that, and it's easy to lose.
I don't think you build credibility through entertainment. I think that can just help you.
Sure, it makes you a real person.
Yeah, but I think it's careful. You have to be careful to not carry that over into your reporting. If you want to be an entertaining person, but if you're covering a beat, then you've got to keep it to the facts about that beat, which doesn't apply to all of us. Obviously, your role is a little bit different.
There are people.
The reporters, you have to really stick.
And sometimes what that comes from is the organization. Like I have a friend that works for MLB.com. He has to. Nothing that's not about that team, nothing that's not factual. We don't even want opinion. We want facts and things that are supported, because it's kind of goes back to talking about the Associated Press. It's fact. We get a little more leeway in that we can take a step back from that. Look, we want people to know you and make you approachable. That way they're going to be more open to when you have your news, when you have your facts. But a lot of that depends on who you're working for. I mean, that's very true.
Well, I know for a fact I had asked, I said, listen, people are going to try to goad you into Twitter wars. And and we've all read about infamous ones. And
Bite
I
on a
said,
few, and then it becomes easier.
Right.
And I said, no, I just need permission, because I don't take fools lightly, and I have my own personality, and I will not embarrass the station, but I will call someone out if they're bugging me. And if you're making me go on Twitter, I just want you to know that. And they know my personality, so they know. And what I have found is some people can't handle those back and forths well. My rules are, just like in any part of my life, if you have an argument with someone, I don't care if it's your little brother, your mom, your friend, you don't call names. You don't call names, and you just try to, be factual, but I will go back and forth. And I would say 9 times out of 10, that person comes around to, all right, we agreed to disagree, but oh my gosh, I'm following you. And then you get 10 other followers. If you can stay true to who you are and not have one of those infamous Twitter meltdowns and that you regret because you can lose a job, that's one thing that reporters have to remember.
Dave's right. Have one and you'll never have another.
Yeah.
Well,
But it's keep your objectivity.
speaking of name calling on Twitter, Tom Powers had a rather infamous tweet not too long ago in connection with the firing of Tubby Smith. Is it different in the sports Twitterverse in the sense that name calling is okay?
What did he call him? We didn't see this.
I followed. He must have done it in the morning before we were all awake.
I'm like, what did he say?
Dave, do you know this?
This is not registering with
Charlie, can you fill us
I
in
can
on
think
this?
of a column that he wrote, but not.
Well, it caused a fair amount of consternation in some circles here because he referred to whoever fired Tubby Smith as a douchebag.
Oh, right. That the Norwood T. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So,
I don't know if I'd have tweeted that.
that.
I didn't see that. Actually.
I didn't see that either. I don't
didn't
remember
hear that either.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of those words you don't throw out there.
No.
Or 2 words.
Why not? And I asked that. No. The reason I asked the question is because if whether you're listening to some sports talk radio or certainly if you look at comments on newspaper sports pages, a lot of the fans get pretty raunchy in their language unless it gets removed by a moderator or something. So why is that part of the sports culture and you're not supposed to play in that field or what?
I wondered how his editors felt about that, and I didn't hear anything about it because I've been going to school. I haven't been writing, so I didn't report it. But it does strike me that for the standards that mainstream media sets for itself, I would think douchebag is probably off limits. Yeah, I would think that's probably not cool. Now, in the same breath, I will say if you're a sports fan, douchebag's probably a word that you've heard more than a few times. So the question is, what's the point of the standard, right? Is it appropriate? Is it necessary? When I read that, I said, Tom Powers is just saying something that probably thousands of people are saying.
But he's also a columnist, and they get away with a
that's
little
right.
more.
Well, he didn't even cross that line,
come
right?
Full circle.
But I think in general, I wouldn't ever. I might tweet about things that I don't write about just because nobody wants to hear about these things in the newspaper. But I would never use language on Twitter that I wouldn't use in newspaper or online. I just think that's kind of the standard for me.
Right. It's like talking to your parents. That's what I always say. Whether you're on Twitter or on TV, it's like my friends say, "How do you not swear on TV?" I say, "How do you not swear in front of your parents?" I don't. I can't.
We're Irish Catholic. That's not a good
Well,
statement.
AJ Clemente shows you why you have to make a habit of not swearing.
Around an open mic anywhere or around a keyboard anywhere.
Don't get me started on that.
Okay. I want to ask one more question, then I do want to open it up to the audience, which is one of the things that codes of ethics for news organizations typically include are very long lists of conflicts of interest, things that reporters can't do and maintain their independence, or the word that we don't use that much anymore, objectivity. And yet when I look at what sports journalists do, or at least some sports journalists do, somehow the rules seem to be a little bit different. And I'm thinking about Frank DeFord, for example, great commentator, I think, wrote for Sports Illustrated for many years, comments on NPR, Princeton graduate, really literate. I like to listen to his commentary. He served as the national chair of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for 16 years, and now he's chairman emeritus. I think most working journalists would say, outside of sports, would say, that's not something I should be doing. We have Dawn's bio saying she's involved with Charity House and Special Olympics and several cancer charities. Randy Shaver at Care 11 reports on high school sports. He raises money at high school games for his Cancer Research Foundation. I don't think you'd see a lot of journalists outside of the sports field doing those types of things. So I'm curious to know what you all think about are the rules different? And if so, why are they different?
Go ahead.
No.
We're encouraged to. We have been told to do that. Community appearances, if you want to help with the charity, we're encouraged to do that. And actually, I know a lot of news people who are involved as well. Maybe they just don't put it on their bio, or our place wants you to put it on their bio because they want you to feel like you're part of the community and helping others.
I would think the journalistic standard would be, let's say you're working for the Bob Foundation, whatever that is, and it comes out that the Bob Foundation has been embezzling money. Well, if you're involved with them, you obviously would just recuse yourself from the story. And a lot of it is just trusting you to know when you need to let somebody know, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. I'll take it one step further. People, the number one question we always get, do you guys root for the teams? Do you guys root for your teams? The answer, quite honestly, you're absolutely right, we do, and here's why. It's not because I have a Twins hat or a Wild jersey. I do have a Twins hat and a Wild jersey, but that's not. It's good business. You are going to read our articles, if the Wild go to the Stanley Cup playoffs, more people are going to watch me, or Stanley Cup finals, I should say. More people are going to watch me in the next 2 months than I get normally. So you're absolutely right, I want that team to win.
I don't think that's universal, though, at all.
Well, but here's the catch. My job is to not let that cloud my report. I can't go into the locker room and go, God, tough loss, guys. That's too bad. But you'll get them next time, right? That's where the catch is.
Well, and that's
my heart of hearts, do I want them to win the Stanley Cup? You're darn right I do, because more people are going to see me do my work. It's the truth. And that goes with anything.
So you're rooting for the story, not the team, essentially.
Right.
Well,
Both the story.
that's
That's
But you can't let it.
Do you think?
Right.
Do you think
Rooting
is
is
the right
I
word?
want them. I'm pulling internally for them to win.
Because you want the story.
Right.
So sometimes you're rooting for them to lose because you want the story.
So I just want to provide a counterexample to this. Yeah. I spent 2 years as the backup Twins beat writer for UPI, for those of you who are old enough to remember UPI. And I'm a big Twins fan. I have season tickets now. I make no bones about being a local sports fan. In 2 years of covering Tom Kelly, I pretty much hated the Twins. I mean, I had to stop being a sports writer because I wanted to be a baseball fan again, and I had other options. So it's funny how when you get up close and personal with these people, maybe it's all changed, but it's not necessarily going to make you a bigger fan of who you're covering. Some of them are assholes. And so you just tend to sink back into that journalism tradition where, not like us. But I mean, you just sink into that journalism behavior where suddenly, you're just covering the story.
You got to be a pro. You have to do your job.
Well, for me personally, it's individuals that I like, and I separate it. Fans all the time, I say, I can't believe you just tweeted a picture of your Red Sox cap. I thought you were a Twins fan. I said, let's get this straight. I am not a fan of the teams I cover. I'm not. I am unbiased, and I cover the game. There are individuals that I like, and it would be great if they won the World Series. We're following all the way through. I like to see teams succeed. But my hometown is Boston, and I like the Red Sox, I like the Bruins. However, if you better be sure, if the Bruins are playing the Wild, I am all professional. And if I'm covering that. But if I'm home and I'm at a Bruins game and they're playing well, I can wear whatever I want. So you have to have delineated hats. And I think fans at home don't understand that. They're like, well, how can you be a Bruins fan and cover the Wild? I'm like, trust me, when I'm working, I'm not a fan of any team. I'm not. And sometimes I like some individuals to do well.
You're a fan of employment.
Exactly. But you also have to be, just like I do not call coaches coach. They're not my coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember saying that when they said, hey, Coach Pitino will come over and talk to you. I said, okay. So when Rich comes over, they go, yeah, Coach. I go, well, he's your coach. He's not mine. They go, yes, he is. I go, I don't go to the U. And I'm not a player. So no, so my pet peeve is when a reporter says, Coach, and I'm old school, where I'm on the same level. I'll call Tubby Tubby. I'll call Rich Rich. You're not my coach.
Dawn, do you feel like you have to be more traditionally professional because you're a woman in this?
I think you're under scrutiny more. I've been doing it for a long time, so I don't feel that now. But absolutely, there's so many ethics rules that just go with journalism. There's so many unwritten ethics rules for women on top of that. I had an intern in Chicago get kicked out of the Cubs locker room for what she was wearing, and that would never happen to a man. Although I told her what not to wear, because even though it was an unwritten rule, she shouldn't wear that and she didn't listen.
They wrote those rules now, though, in baseball.
Yes.
Last year.
Mm-hmm.
Rules of conduct code for media. I want to
me. However, it's even different for women.
Right.
So,
if I may, I'm curious to hear your opinion on exactly what we're talking about, because as much as I would like our local teams to win, I would imagine, and I never had a chance to cover, like you cover, my college teams. We're not peers with the guys and girls we cover, but you're actually kind of peers with yours. How do you kind of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. How does what we're talking about apply to you? And I'm actually just curious to hear it.
I don't think it's that much different, because I think, honestly, all of us as journalists have our favorite players, our favorite teams. You can't pretend that you don't, but you have to be objective in reporting one way or the other. So, yeah, I mean, as college journalists, we know some of the players on the team, and some of us are close to them, and you have to just create that distance. And maybe internally you think, I really want this team to win, or maybe you cheer for them when nobody's around. But again, that applies to all of us, and if you're going to be a journalist, you have to not let other people perceive that, so that you can stay objective.
Just to your point about, not to belabor the woman part, but when I first got the job here, I remember my general manager, who was also a woman, asking if I had sources and athletes' numbers, and she wanted to judge by my sources in my phone. And I said, I don't keep athletes' phone numbers in my cell phone. And she's like, well, why not? I said, I'm a single woman in sports. I'm not keeping an athlete's cell phone number in my cell phone. No, that's different. Or a guy can have all that, unless it's somewhere I am friends with his wife as well, and I'm friends with them away from the field. I keep them all in a professional.
I would never think.
Yeah,
that's a great point. I would never think.
And that goes back to policing your own career. I do not go into a locker room unless I have a photographer with me. And you can. Locker room's open. Hey, I got to touch base with Joe Mauer about coming in. Oh, locker room's open. Just go talk to him. I know.
Wow.
And I still do that to this day. I mean, I've been doing it for quite some time. You just don't need to have anything that can be considered suspect. And then it's just rules that you do. Like I said, when I played basketball, I hated the 3-second rule. I hate some rules. That's just some of those rules that, if you want to play the game, you play by the rules.
Locker rooms are weird places.
Yeah, yes. I'm like, no, wait outside. I don't have a photographer. I don't need to be in there if I don't have a camera guy, so I'm going to draw a picture or something. So. Yeah.
Michael, did you have a comment? I thought we maybe cut you off. Nope. Okay, all right. Well, then now I'm going to open it up to the audience. And Cassie has the mic, and if you'd like to ask a question, please wait for the mic because we are recording this.
This is being recorded?
Allie's telling us.
Just kidding.
This is off the record.
Just kidding. Glad I didn't call you the name I was going to call you.
I wanted to pick up on something Dawn said. You said early, if somebody said, well, CCO is reporting this, you're not going to go with it because of that. Mm-hmm. But we are seeing a ton of that now in all sports reporting, especially with ESPN. Adam Schefter has a source, and he tweets that he's got a source that said something. Mm-hmm. I bet you everybody here goes with that kind of story quite often if it's a big enough story. Brett Favre was the great example. There were 18 billion false stories coming from unnamed sources by ESPN or some of the other media, and then somebody picks it up and says ESPN reported. They don't even know who ESPN's source was. Mm-hmm. So it's that far removed yet. And then everybody else tweets or reports that the Star Tribune is reported because Adam Schefter reported, whatever. Has that changed your jobs, the amount of attention you have to pay to other media and the amount of time you spend reporting what other media say?
Only about 1,000%.
Mike
it really has. It absolutely does.
Mike and I tweeted each other about something
Very
just like
similar.
this about 2 weeks ago. Attribute and confirm. You
You
attribute
haven't
and confirm.
confirmed anything, and you haven't really attributed it to a source.
Well,
Well, they've already gone out on a limb and said it. So if you attribute it, yes. If I'm going to go on there on my newscast and say, I will retweet something Adam Schefter saying, because this is his word, not mine. This might be interesting. And he's also a legit source. However, if I'm going to go on the news, I'm going to make other phone calls or find other outlets or find out other things that can confirm the same thing before I go with it that way.
reporting an attributed story is a loss.
Yeah.
You're losing. No matter
We
what
all do it.
It's right, because you have to. I'm still serving the people that are watching me at 6:20 p.m. And I need to tell them, hey, this is a story that ESPN has. And I'll tell you, it's not policy, but pretty much how we do it at work. And I don't know if we'll attribute the Star Tribune, we'll
according
attribute
to-
the Pioneer Press, we won't attribute Fox 9. We won't go with a story if Dawn's the only one that has it, because we're in direct competition with TV. But the Star Tribune, we'll say Star Tribune has it. Now, I'll go nuts to try and, they beat me to the story, I'll try to confirm it any way I can. But if it gets to be showtime and it's a piece of information that the viewer needs, wants, and expects me to have, I'll do it with an attribution. But that's a loss. That is admitting I lost it.
Well,
Admitting you didn't get it yourself. Right?
And one of my two lowest moments on Twitter came fairly recently when I followed Bob Collins' lead and made fun of local reporters who were getting their asses beat on prominent local stories by national outlets. It was a low moment because it was very unkind on my part, and also I was tacitly encouraging, I think, more irresponsibility on the part of local reporters and pushing people to get stuff first, which is stupid. So I still feel bad about that, guys. That said, it's a big phenomenon right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, stories that some local reporter would have gotten, 10 years ago?
Right.
Maybe even 5? I don't know. A majority, some high percentage, are now get broken by national outlets with national contacts and a national audience. And
And a national television
and
contract.
it really is putting a lot
Right.
of pressure on these local.
That's important.
It's very much in play is that I think a lot of this national news comes from outlets that do have, the TV contracts, the right holders to the actual broadcast of the games. I think there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes horse trading that goes on there.
It goes back to one source as well. I mean, everything about the Gophers coaching search was coming from one guy in the national media. And there was a prior relationship with someone here.
Yes.
And I'm sure you guys are getting the same as we. This one guy is ahead of all of us. And whatever he's done in the past to establish the relationship to get that information, I can't beat that. I can't. Now, I've got to go on and say, this guy from CBS.com says it's Richard Pitino.
Now, do your bosses still hammer you for that?
Of course they do.
Absolutely.
Of course they do. I need to be able to get that. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to use all my sources. But at the end of the day, if I've exhausted what I can do, but not even the end of the day, at 6:20 when I'm going to go on the air, if I've exhausted my sources, I have to report that story and attribute.
Chris, back to your original question, I think too, the need for speed has become such, is driving all this, and it's a little bit reckless. And I think sometimes you're choosing your retweeting or your citing of other sources based on how trustable the reporting is on the other side of it. If you see Adam Schefter saying something, you're probably more likely to believe it and think it's credible, especially if it's something you're not able to immediately obtain, as opposed to someone who you don't know or who is or who does not have the same kind of record of credibility.
Incarcerated Bob.
Well,
Incarcerated Bob.
because you brought up the Brett Favre situation where people were when he first came here. This is not the second time, but you talk about prior relationships. I happened to cover the Packers years before in Milwaukee, and just happened to know some of his family members. But getting the information from his family members was not easy. But and our station would not go with something just because Channel 5 had it or someone else had it. Now, I'm on vacation in Cape Cod, and I finally get the phone call because I have been talking to his brother and talking to his family and getting tweets from them because we all know they like to text. So getting text from them that finally, here I am, I'm not even there in Cape Cod, and I get the text. He is coming. He's flying in on a private plane, St. Paul, everything. I'm calling, and they're like, well, who's your source? So you don't want to reveal your source, but you can to your bosses. I'm like, his brother. Like, oh, We better get there. I said, this is the time the plane's landing. He doesn't know the flight number, but this is the where it's going, and And it turned out to be right, obviously, but our station was so paranoid to get it wrong that they never asked who our sources are, but they were adamant saying, well, I know you have sources. And I said, yes, his brother, and he's coming with him.
But his brother had been known for betting.
Correct, but he
Same with
always...
his agent.
His agent, but however, when I would say, can I go with this, he would say no. He never had burned me in the past. So that's the one good thing, that knowing someone for, not closely, but knowing them for 10 years.
Did you name him?
Huh?
According to his brother, or did you do source close to?
I asked what he could be attributed to, and he said family member says. So I didn't name him specifically, but it turned out he had never burned me in the past, and that's where you have to go on, because others were burned. It's different, and that's where you could get burned too. But when he says, listen, I'm getting on the plane and we're landing at so-and-so and this is where we're going to be, better, darling, get your chopper ready, like I'm not going to not call them and tell them that, So that's when you have to rely, on your source and not on the other station, and go with it. And if you're wrong, then your career's on the line.
I think you've got the mic.
You spoke a little bit earlier to the case in Ohio. And I, as a high school teacher, I appreciate your desire to sort of protect the fact that they're kids, but would you feel comfortable commenting on sports coverage and perhaps broadening it to regular news coverage of that situation? How you felt about it?
You mean, let me know if I'm going the wrong way with this. Once it's in the courts, once it's a police issue, then yes, you as a child, a minor, have, if the state and the police and the authorities are going to run you through the ringer, then I have the right to also. Whatever you've done, I'm going to give you due process. I'm going to give you fair reporting. But that is to the point where the high schoolers that I mentioned earlier, had that ever gone to a court or detention center, then we're on it.
I'm wondering if it maybe leaned a little bit too far in the other direction, where it was a little too protective because they were kids.
Sometimes a friend of mine is a clinical psychologist that works with a lot of kids that are abused in the Twin Cities, and said that there was a story that was coming out because the way they write their evaluation of some of these, and these people have already been abused, and it goes to a police report. So that becomes public. And the written report in one of the newspapers, I won't say which one, was harsh for a person or a young child who've already gone through the worst of it. And Fox Now was picking up the story. And my friend was very afraid of how it was going to be covered, so called the family. But you can say the facts in a clean way, as clean as it can be. You can state the facts, but not go over to the other edge, because if that person's already a victim, you don't want to victimize them anymore. And I think that's where there is some responsibility in journalism and ethics, where you can stick to the facts and you don't have to give 100% of everything that is written in that police report. We see police reports for athletes all the time, and we could go out and say everything that's on there, but sometimes it's not needed. And so certainly not in the case of a child.
Well, and the Steubenville case, too, is another example of you're only as good as your sources, right? Mm-hmm. And so if the town is rallying around the football player and the victim or the victim's allies aren't talking, you're in trouble as a reporter. Mm-hmm. And you can just imagine, here we've talked about getting it wrong, ha ha. Well, imagine if you get that story wrong. Imagine if you're wrong. Obviously there's consequences if you don't publicize that this happened. That's a huge problem. But there's an opposite problem, too. So this is one of those situations that you don't measure twice and cut once. You measure about 50 times.
You lie to a cop, you go to jail. You lie to us, we take the fall.
Yeah. Such as it is. I hope that statement didn't just spark 8 other questions. I didn't mean to be that deep.
I'm going to retweet it later. I'll attribute it to you.
I'll let you off easy, actually, Chris. If we could get back to the conversation about agents, and you talked about it, build it crumb by crumb, your reputation, and it takes one crappy decision to retweet something dumb or run with a story, and you've lost everything. How do you balance not just being a mouthpiece of these agents who would clearly then have an and objective in getting you to report some news for their client.
They are invaluable sources, and they are awful sources.
Yeah.
It is the most one-sided, and you mentioned it. Sure. They are the most one-sided source you could ever have. They are looking out for one side, but the nugget they give you absolutely can lead you to something else. You find out from an agent, hey, your team just called my guy. Well, then you can go to the team and say, all right, I heard you called this guy. Does that mean you're not happy anymore with this guy? Well, they're never going to offer up the information that they made contact with person A, so now you've got a story. Now, a smart team would say, no, he didn't. Well, then you've got the agent saying one thing and the team saying another. Agents they're the kindling. They're not going to be the whole bonfire. They are almost always just a spark that leads you to something else. Very rarely will you go, except for something like contract details. The guy signs and he says, yeah, it was for 5 years, $22 million. Right. Well, they love that information because that makes them sound good that they got these guys millions.
And let's make sure we don't get blinded by the magical sports dust. I mean, this is the same thing in any beat, right? I mean, this is a PR person calling you on a business story. This is, a political aide calling you in a political story. I mean, if you have an ounce, a gram of savvy, never forget who's paying them, and then you usually can make some good judgment.
But they can be great sources.
Yep.
You have to put up with them.
I talk to PR people and political aides all the time.
They can be great sources. And they love stabbing each other in the back.
That's what you got to do is you got to get to their egos.
Get them turned on each other, then you get good
egos.
sources.
I've got two questions, both kind of related. Who gets our coaches fired? It's U of M can't seem to keep a basketball or a football coach very long. And secondly, that could be football coach. The Vikings coach. We go through quite a few coaches around here, it seems. But secondly, when it comes to whether people are jerks to reporters, and when it comes down to, like, for instance, Fran Tarkenton, not the most fluffy or bundle of joy guys, and he gets into the Hall of Fame on the second ballot. And Dan Marino, who breaks all Tarkenton's records, gets in on the first ballot, having gone to 2 fewer Super Bowls than Tarkenton. And everybody loves Dan Marino. So I'm like, oh well. So answer any one, if you please.
Let's do the first one first.
You want me to answer?
Well, it's just because we love firing coaches tweet line that went out the other day.
We do love firing coaches. I think ultimately what gets coaches fired so much more frequently these days, I think, is just the pressure and the ridiculous amount of importance we put on sports. I mean, it's good for us because it's kind of our jobs now to, feed this beast to some degree. But the way that sports is treated these days puts so much pressure on these coaches, and the success, the relative success and failure is a snap judgment these days. So I think what ultimately gets coaches fired is the pressure cooker, the public backlash, and then the owner or the administration, if it's a college, just ultimately kind of giving into that great monster that is the pressure and to win.
Plus, this is a messed up market. We have too many sports teams, not enough dollars. There's always teams are scraping way harder than they do in bigger markets. They don't have as much money to pay salaries and things like that. So it's a tough place, I think.
It is, but there's a lot of national money out there too, and I think that's the great equalizer. The TV contracts, they make everybody a lot of money. So I don't think anybody's really crying poor here.
I honestly believe the media can't get coaches fired. We can amplify the sentiment that's already out there. Now we can save them. It's a good guy coach or a good guy player. And I'm not saying the media. It's a lot easier to protect the good guy than it is to go after the bad guy. I really believe that.
Well, I think in this market, too, what is amplified is, and I'm not from here, but I've been here 8 years, but I've been in a lot of other markets, and this market does seem to have a lot of coaches fired.
Well, our teams have been lousy.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, I think when you have a constant state of losing across the board, there's a frustration level that sets in, that people, they think about the past and they dig up the past, and then that groundswell sometimes is scary. And that can get the motivation going even more so. The only other thing I've ever seen anything like it is when I covered the Cubs. I've never seen Cubs go through so many managers in my entire career of working in 5 different markets. And then when I came here, and then when you learn well, you weren't here when this happened. And, oh, there goes the Gophers again. Or, oh, the Wild, they couldn't clinch against the Oilers. Oh, there we go again. I'm like, that's one game. It's just that mentality that is frustrating for fans.
We are a very collectively negative fan base.
But let's be honest too.
You know what?
But let's say
goes
this
into
too.
that, right?
Ever since Lou Holtz, there is not a long list of coaches who have been fired here who have gone on to great things in some other market.
Leave here to go somewhere on their own volition.
Yeah.
I think he's the last one.
I mean, maybe some hockey guys. I don't know.
We're right on time. I was going to say, I want to answer your second half, but if it's easier to do after class,
No, it's fine.
we can do that.
We're not in class here.
It's not a.
It goes to it kind of goes with what I was saying about the coaches. It's easy to protect it. I'm trying to give it. Michael Kadire, all-time good guy, and he was in a toxic locker room, and there was a big backlash from fans. Why is he leaving? Why is he leaving? I just kind of stepped back. My own, again, it's an ethics question, but we knew why he left. That was the most toxic locker room 2 years ago I've ever seen, and we knew that. Oh, he's a traitor. Okay, it's not true. We're not going to go there now. If someone's trying to run a guy out of town, that might get amplified. When I say we, I don't necessarily.
But then you
Like
see
the
the
T-shirt at the end of the table.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Delvin Young, baby.
You know?
But I mean, then we do, as a reader, we do get mad when somebody leaves, and then all of a sudden the sports writers start to write, that guy was a piece of crap. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me when he was here? Why didn't you tell me all this stuff? Part of it is maintaining relationships and sourcing and all of that. But, I mean, it's one of the things, at least the people I follow on Twitter get the maddest about. It's like, why do we only get the crap on the guys when they leave?
Well, see, I personally don't mind if they're mean. Like, I got here, and Randy Moss, everyone's like, no one was talking to him in the locker room. And I said, does Randy not talk? Does he come out to a podium? They're like, you can try talking to him. So I went over, I said, hey, Randy, can I ask you a question? He went, hell no. And he didn't even look at me. And I just started laughing. Like, he didn't even turn around. He didn't look at me. He's like, hell no. And I laughed. I said, okay, thank you. And he turned around, he goes, you're thanking me? And I said, you don't have to talk to me. No, but you answered, thanks. He goes, I like you. I'm like, whatever. And I did not mind covering him because I personally think if I were a pro athlete, the way some reporters, not all, but some reporters come after them to get a quote, I might be a jerk after a game. I don't know.
To your question, we'll rally behind a guy that's a good guy and that is perceived by us as a good guy. Mm-hmm. But the Hall of Fame is the last time to land a punch. When that's the last chance you have if a guy was a jerk, whether he was in your market or another one. And I'm not saying I agree with this. I have a lot of problems with how, especially baseball's Hall of Fame works. That's your last chance to land a punch on a guy that was a jerk. And that's why it happened.
And more news organizations are forbidding their journalists from voting and things like that because of the sort of corruption objectivity.
And like I said, we're not as likely to do it when he's playing because that makes us look bad. We're not being professional. Randy Moss. Whatever. But that's your last chance where you have that, and some would say responsibility to hold that against them. And it's not right. It's not right.
I don't know, but they don't have to talk to us, though. That's where I come from. They don't have to. They're getting paid to play. And sometimes the reason why athletes are so good on the field is they're amped up like that. So I just don't take that personal. And I don't know, maybe that is a woman's perspective versus a man's. And I played sports. I don't know. If someone's a jerk to me, he's a jerk to me personally. I don't know if I would viciously go after him professionally. Right. That's all.
And you should. I agree.
No.
I agree with you.
Go, Dave. Just jump in, Dave.
There's a fine line between covering news and making news. I'll give you an example. Chris said earlier that he's got an opinion on what those high school kids did. So you've talked, Michael's going to buy you a beer at Stubb and Herb's when this is over. You're at the table, they say, okay, Chris, what's your theory? And you answered the question, I'm at the next table, I recognize you, and I tweet, and all of a sudden it's out there what your theory is on that, and you've now made the news. I mean, it seems that the roles, the privacy is changing. How much do you or don't you have? And how comfortable or uncomfortable are you with that role?
I want to answer that.
So in other words, we're just like the athletes we cover and the politicians we cover and everybody else. I mean, there's a certain rough justice in that.
You know what you're getting into. You're exactly right. If it were to come out, if I saw a tweet with my name, just heard at JC Long, feel free to follow, just heard at JC Long talking, and he says this is what happened in this story, I would immediately immediately go into PR mode. This person overheard a conversation and it's not the full story.
Correct.
Do not take this as a report. I would try to get out in front of it immediately and say that. Do I sometimes, if I'm going to take a real strong stance after a beverage or two, do this? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, some of us have no separation between our professional and personal lives, so it makes life easier. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is part of the reason that if you can use social networking well, it can work for you. And maybe this is, I mean, really, I'm in your territory in terms of the public relations stuff. But if you can sort of establish yourself as a whole person and get people to know you, I think that your personality and your reputation has more resilience when you actually show yourself to be a human with a wart. Maybe that's naive, but I'd like to believe that. So far, so good for me, but I'm a pretty small fish.
Long story short, I was at a minor league hockey game in Florida when I was working there. My wife remembers this story vividly because it mortified all of us. Long story short, player on the team who I had a great relationship with was having a terrible season, awful season. And I'm remarking to my friend sitting next to me, I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if it's just he's done. He's been having a terrible season. My friend asked, what's wrong with this guy? He was a superstar 2 years ago. And I go, I don't know. I don't know if it's old age. I don't know if he's hurt. It's frustrating. He's been so bad this year. 30 seconds later, as I continued to explain my point, and I like this guy. I had a great relationship. We are friends with him and his now wife. The lady in front of me turns around and says, you realize this is his mother sitting in front of him? And she was sitting with his then wife, who unfortunately we didn't have to deal with because that fell apart about a month later. Who would think in an arena of 16,000, and it was fair. And I said it when she said it. I said, well, maybe you can help me out. Has he been playing hurt? Something's wrong. She goes, no, I guess he's just old and washed up. And she turned around. Hard lesson. So I immediately played back in my head. Oh, God, what did I say? What did I say?
What did you say?
Truth is an absolute defense.
And I told him the story 9 months later. I said, Ernie, funny story. This happened. I was sitting behind your wife, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I said. I go, I just want to make sure if that story got back to you. I don't deny saying it, but I was curious what was wrong. He goes, no, she never told me, but we're fine. And I was. Just that electric bolt that goes down your spine when you realize, I can't believe this is happening. And my wife was ready to just walk home and say, I'll meet you back home later. It was horrible. So, yes, it does happen.
Well, and there's some things that are, I think Lane Kiffin is a tool. And I have tweeted that after I saw post-game interviews where he's just rude to people. And I will tweet Lane Kiffin is a tool. All these Lane Kiffin supporters are saying, as a reporter, you should not be able to say that. And I said, I am watching this at home, and I am a viewer, and I think he is a tool. And I can have my opinion. Now, if I were covering him, I may actually say that to his face. Personally, but professionally, no. But
Mr. Kiffin, as a
you still
tool.
have to have your own. Excuse me, Mr. Tool.
Mr. Tool.
But that's the trick. If you were hired here, God forbid,
Yeah.
you'd have to put that away. And you would.
Right.
And you would.
And I would say, just so you know, a tweet might come up from the past that I called you a tool after that post-game interview where you were rude to people. And you'd be like, wow, okay. And that's my personality. I would say that, So, like, you have to get out in front of something. That's all.
How often do you guys write a tweet and then delete it before you send it?
More and more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll catch myself. You know, a lot of it is friendly fire.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
someone in the market, in the media, will do something that's either stupid or dumb or I don't agree with or it's dead wrong, and we call it in the NRS, we call it friendly fire. We don't do it.
Well, it's that
We don't
great.
deal with
It's
it.
that great XCD cartoon. Somebody's wrong on the internet somewhere. I have to say something. Somebody's wrong on the internet somewhere. I have that cartoon on my monitor, and it's my icon. It's my totem. I seek inspiration. So follow me. You save tons of tweets. That way.
I'd like to interject one point, and then there may be one more question. Okay, well, maybe we'll have to take them up with the panel after we wrap up. But I heard somebody say truth is an absolute defense, and we know that the Minnesota Supreme Court has said calling somebody a tool is an opinion, and so it's absolutely protected. But I guess I'm just curious, even though we're talking about ethics tonight, whether any of you on the panel think about legal issues when you're covering these stories, as distinguished from the ethics issues we've been talking about tonight. I mean, you've been talking about the decisions you make about covering juveniles. Some of what you're hesitating to report would be perfectly legal for you to report. So does law inform what you're doing particularly, or do you not think about that much?
If a player is arrested or charged, or you have to get your language correct. Allegedly, reportedly, being charged or not charged. I mean, that kind of stuff. Yes, you have to be very careful.
It's not as much a problem at this level because we work for TV stations that are large enough and have revenue enough to have pretty good lawyers. When in doubt, pick up the phone, is what we're told.
Do you do that before you tweet?
No. Well, if it was going to be something that was a direct accusation, newsworthy, and it was questionable, then I would. Not in that position. But if I were, I would. Where that's a problem sometimes at smaller stations, they don't want to pay somebody $100 an hour to figure out whether I can put that story on the air. And I would be a lot less likely to run a story up the chain of command when I worked in Duluth, when I worked in Fort Myers, as I am here. And the stakes were a lot lower. Words are words and lives are lives, but the stakes are a lot less there in terms of my professional capital. I don't mean me. I'm speaking in generalities here. I'm not trying to play down small market television, but it's very different when I know I can get our lawyer who sits upstairs on the phone in 2 seconds as opposed to having to have a GM sign off on spending the money to have a lawyer to find this. They're just going to say, you know what, let's just not. That's what would happen in small.
And in TV, sometimes you can have the best words, best of intentions, and if someone else accidentally rolls the wrong video over you talking about someone, that's a lawsuit. So there's so many more moving parts. If they put up the wrong graphic, if they put up the wrong name and it's charged, and it's, first of all, the wrong name, and then it's the wrong picture, it's someone's mom, I mean, you are in trouble, and that's not something, you're involved in the case because you're the person saying it or reporting it, but it's not you alone. So that's where it's different when it comes to television. It becomes a bigger issue that way.
Who's got the mic?
One more question.
All right, well, this is kind of going back to talking about Manti Te'o and situations like that. I was wondering what your guys' opinion was on players like that whose, I guess, legacy is possibly tarnished by one story that breaks. If, let's say, he ends up, nothing else happens to him, he ends up being a great NFL linebacker, and he'll always be viewed as that great NFL linebacker who had that girlfriend story. And, I mean, where it can affect, things that happen to them early in their career and stories that break. I mean, one that comes to mind, you were talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame, players like Pete Rose, who arguably one of the better players who isn't going to get in because of something that happened. And
I don't form your opinion. I give you facts, you form your own opinion. That's how it's supposed to work. It doesn't always work that way. That's how it's supposed to.
And we've seen the opposite of that with Ray Lewis. I mean, so people can overcome things, and that's not any of our doing either. If you just report the facts of this is what he's doing on the field. So,
if what you're saying is, should we have gone lighter on Manti Te'o because it could affect his whole life? Is that?
No, I was just more kind of wondering what your opinion was on players whose legacy gets.
We're cognizant of the repercussions of our reporting.
Yeah.
But as long as they are the facts, and you can defend the fact that they are the facts, our job, fundamentally as journalists, is to put them out there and let you make up your own mind. And if you think Te'o was an innocent victim, okay. If you think he was a blowhard that was trying to win the Heisman Trophy by making up a story, okay. I'm not going to tell you which one's right. I'll tell you what we know, and your call.
And as more time passes, if he does become a great player, we've seen it time and time and again, these things fade. They don't ever go away, but they fade. It's not the first thing you think of anymore now that Tiger Woods is a cheater on his wife. You think of, you think a lot more about golf now when you see Tiger Woods than you did, 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
some people do.
One of the big lies is that there are no second acts in American life. That is so not true. It's absolutely not true.
Pete Rose is a good example. That is the first thing you think of still with Pete Rose.
Yeah. But that was a thing that involved the sport itself and not just his own.
That was more.
The rules
that's a little bit different.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Keep them out of the Hall of Fame.
I would love to go on, but I think we have to let our panel at least take a break. So thank you all for coming this evening, and please join me in thanking them.